Time for the business then. Owen here, as ever at this time, of course. And the markets have shrugged off that Standard & Poor's threat to downgrade the whole of Europe. Bit surprising, isn't it?
Well, a little bit, and yet they didn't really yet react quite as badly as you might think yesterday, Stuart, when that S&P downgrade hit the ground. So the markets aren't really recouping that many losses, apart from the DAX, which did finish yesterday a little bit down. Be that as it may, all of the markets in Europe opening up very strongly, in fact, all over 1.5%. So perhaps investors aren't quite as worried about S&P's outlook for Europe as the policymakers and leaders are right now. The Asian market, similar story really. The Nikkei finishing around 1.7% up. The Hang Seng nearly finished the day's trade. You can see they're in similar sort of territory. Just while we're talking markets as well, one of the Chinese government's economists thinks that the economy there will grow by a very modest 8.7% next year. Not bad. Inflation will stay at around 4%. So it appears that the Chinese are getting a medium-term grip on their inflation problems.
Now, the US Treasury Secretary is on a bit of a mission to try and build some consensus on a stable financial future for Europe. But, Owen, you think he's fanning a few flames?
Well, you know, my mum, when my younger brother and I used to play up, she used to literally bang our heads together to knock some sense into us. And you get the feeling Timothy Geithner, although he does it a lot more diplomatically, is doing a similar kind of thing. You know things are serious when the Americans head over this side of the Atlantic before these big summits. Start doing the rounds as Timothy Geithner, the Treasury Secretary, is doing. He'll have lunch with Nicolas Sarkozy here in Paris today. Yesterday, he was at the Bundesbank talking to the finance minister of Germany, really trying to build a little bit of cohesion. He likes the look of this new rapprochement between Sarkozy and Angela Merkel about forming a closer Europe with all the attendant budgetary and fiscal policies that would follow. But I was particularly interested in him saying that he endorses a greater central role for the European Central Bank on this. Remember, politicians in Germany don't like that. That's exactly the opposite of what they want. They want the ECB to step back from this crisis and stop lending emergency credit lines to countries like Italy and Spain. And yet the problem in all of this, as ever, is the money. There simply isn't enough in these bailout funds right now to fund Europe. There's even talk, not just this EFSF that we keep talking about that has just 400 billion euros. There's talk about running that alongside a successor fund that's due to come into effect in the next year or so. That would have around 500 billion euros. So 500 plus 400, well, that's only 900 billion euros. And yet a country like Italy has 2 trillion euros worth of debt. And those are very rudimentary sums that I've sketched out there, but it gives you an idea of the kind of shortfall we've got here. Question marks over what the IMF might do. Of course, these European leaders have been turning to the IMF to see whether it can help out. And I put a question mark over the ECB. There has been a little bit of quid pro quo there. The ECB saying, well, look, if you show greater discipline of your budgets, maybe the ECB can help out. But that would involve more treaties, more unpicking of all this sort of red tape that is currently holding up a lot of these discussions.
Get your mum in, she'll sort it out.
She would bang some heads together. If she's watching, she will remember banging my head.
We can only dream. Now, there are also concerns about Europe developing a two-tier economy with those in and those outside, a bloc that sets common taxes. It's driving renewed tensions between the UK and France. London remains one of the most competitive places in the world to do business, with lower corporate tax than many continental neighbours like France. But Nicolas Sarkozy thinks that in a rapidly evolving Europe, Paris might be a better bet. William Edwards explains.
At the opening of Google's new Paris offices on Tuesday, Nicolas Sarkozy didn't miss an opportunity to highlight France's friendly rivalry with the UK when it comes to business.
Just look at how they're raising taxes in London. We're going to see some of our young people coming back. Come back here.
Friendly business.
No, I'm just joking. Don't tell David Cameron I said that.
In fact, at the moment, it's the UK that's fighting EU attempts to up taxes in the City of London. Despite Europe's crisis of confidence, the city remains one of the world's key financial hubs. With changes to core EU treaties being suggested to save the euro, Britain's Prime Minister says the UK won't sign up unless there are safeguards for the city.
There will be British safeguards and British interests that I will want to insist on, and I won't sign a treaty that doesn't have those safeguards in it around things like, of course, the importance of the single market and financial services.
A key battleground in recent months has been the idea of a financial transaction tax, which would see a small levy placed on banking. The UK argues this would scare off businesses to other financial centres unless it's introduced globally, which won't happen without US support. However, David Cameron's threat to veto a new treaty might not carry much weight. Angela Merkel and Nicolas Sarkozy have already made clear that they'll push through changes using just the 17 Eurozone nations rather than the whole EU, if they have to. That's also something David Cameron wants to avoid, for fear of the UK being left out in the cold in a new two-speed Europe.
Couple of other business stories now, and Greece's new coalition government has passed a new austerity budget for 2012. The legislation aimed at bringing the deficit down from 9% this year to nearly 5.5% over the next 12 months. The measures include more taxes and further public sector cutbacks to meet the terms of a second bailout worth more than 100 billion euros.
And Apple is at the centre of an EU inquiry into the price fixing of ebooks. 5 publishers, including France's Hachette and Penguin from the UK, are also under investigation. It's alleged they colluded with Apple to restrict competition for digital publishing for the iPad. The inquiry was launched following raids earlier this year by EU competition authorities on the offices of several companies linked to digital publishing.
Now, if you were lucky enough to get tickets, you'll have had next summer's London Olympics in your diary for some time. Its stadium is transforming a neglected part of the British capital, but at what cost? Well, auditors say there's now real risk organisers will blow the £9.3 billion budget.
With over 90% of building work completed, next summer's London Olympics are entering the final straight. But while the €11 billion project is currently on time and on budget, the UK's National Audit Office says there's a big risk that more money will be needed. An increase for the opening and closing ceremonies was given the go-ahead this week, but the biggest cost rise is for security.
It was £282 million, it's now £551 million, and they've doubled the number of guards that they need. So there's a real pressure on that. The more they spend on that, the less money there is available for other things like transport, like technology. So that's where the real pressure is coming in the budget.
Organisers are still confident of staying within budget, and they argue that the massive investment will also have longer-term benefits.
Our job now is to keep the lid on that spending, to bring the Olympics in on time and under budget, which we're doing, but also to make sure that that investment delivers for London in the long term. There is no earthly point in sinking £9.3 billion into East London just for the Olympic Games unless we have long-term legacy for this city.
While organisers hope that the Games will give a boost to the UK economy in the long run, any further cost hikes will be controversial as the country grapples with spending cuts to bring down its budget deficit.
Just while we're talking Olympics, just to finish, Stuart, how about this for enterprising? A British athlete, James Ellington, 200-metre sprinter, has put himself up on eBay to try and attract sponsorship to get himself for the Games. He's been plagued by injuries. That's driven, he thinks, a lot of sponsors away from investing in him. So he's put himself up on the auction site just to try and get himself some money and get himself ready for those Games next year. He still has a chance of making the team. It's not been completely decided yet.
Did you get to keep him then if you win?
I'm not sure what you get for that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
All right, Owen, thank you very much. That's Owen here with the Business News. Every day, of course, here on France 24. Weather's up next, and then it's Claire Pride. Stay with us.